Hi, and welcome to the award-winning Connecting with Kim show here on Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network. I'm your host, Kim Droege. Every week, my goal is to bring you information about people, places, and organizations that will help you live your best life in our little corner of paradise. Like and follow my Instagram account, my Facebook page, and my X account for the latest news on the show, my guests, and of course my on-air wardrobe, which is supplied by the Spring Boutique located at the corner of Swann and Henderson. This is an exciting day because we are back in the studio shooting new shows. We have a new studio. Everything is new, and we are welcoming back a friend, and he's been with me from the beginning when I started as a radio show, and I'm so happy to have him in the chair today, and we're catching up because we were supposed to be here weeks ago. My friend and your Hillsborough County property appraiser, Mr. Bob Henriquez. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Well, thanks, Kim. It's always a pleasure to be here.
I am so appreciative of your support throughout the entire process. It's going on 4 years now.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So I know that we talked about it before we went on air, we have a lot of new people that have moved into Hillsborough County.
Boy, do we.
And Tampa Bay, and you know that better than anybody,
Yeah.
being the property appraiser. And I always like to keep the same formula for the show where you share a little bit about your life journey with all those folks out there, because even though I know you really well, they probably don't. And so we want them to know all of the interesting experiences you've had in life that brought you to the position we're here today.
Well, thanks, Kim. I'm a Tampa native, a Hillsborough County native, 5 generations, so I go way back. My family really are sort of the typical Tampa family. My great-grandfather was the last mayor of West Tampa, had his own little cigar factory in West Tampa. My grandmothers both worked in cigar factories. My grandfather on my mother's side was a reader or lector in the cigar factories in Ybor City. I was born and raised here, graduated from Tampa Catholic High School, very proud of that, and I was the head football coach there for many years. After I came back from college, I was fortunate enough being the first of my family to attend or to graduate from college, and I graduated from Princeton University. I tell people I had a Z at the end of my name and could knock people down, so they gave me a shot. And, I've been very blessed. Always wanted to go away to school to experience other things, other places, and other people, but always wanted to come back to this incredible community to give back to all of the folks, the institutions and otherwise, that had allowed me to be successful. And so I started my journey working in the planning department in Hillsborough County, moved on from there, coaching football. One day somebody approached me and said, you should run for office. And I ran for the State House back in 1998 and was blessed to serve in the State House of Representatives for 8 years, from 98 to 2006.
I always forget that about your background,
Yeah.
but that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and came home, worked in the private sector for a little while. I was given the honor to serve as the circuit administrator for the Department of Children and Families. For Pasco and Pinellas County. The governor appointed me to that position, served there for a while, and then ultimately went back in the private sector for a bit, and then decided to run for property appraiser, and have been there now going on, it'll be 11 years.
Oh my God, I remember when you were first elected. It's hard to believe it's been 11 years.
Yeah, it's been an incredible time. I've got a great office, tremendous team. And certainly it's been an amazing time, particularly with what's happened with property values over the last few years. And as you say, folks moving here in an incredibly dynamic, probably the most dynamic market in the country. Your
journey really is a Tampanian story, and I think it's wonderful. And it exemplifies what really our community is all about.
Yeah.
And how I always find it interesting. You never know. I always tell everybody, Tampa's a small town because you never know who's going to be related, married, grew up together, whatever the case may be, in business together. You really need to understand that it's really a small town when you get right down to it.
Yeah, I always say it's a big little town.
Big little town.
And I think that's part of the charm and the greatness that we have here. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to keep that. Over the course of time, it's difficult as people move here and we morph into becoming something else. But it's a very welcoming community. It's a community, as I say, you could be here for 5 days, I feel like you've been here for 5 months. 5 months, I feel like you've been here 5 years. 5 years, like 5 generations. So it's incredibly, it's dynamic, it's welcoming, and it's just a great place to be. And I can't imagine being anywhere else. Every once in a while when I'm stuck in traffic, maybe, but otherwise, no. And I'm fortunate enough to have been able to be honored to give back through my public service. And it's not always. It doesn't have to be that way. You can give back in a lot of ways, as you know,
right.
the way that you do. But I've been blessed to do it through this public service, both as an elected official and also, as a mentor of young people, coaching and being involved in the community. And you can't. We need more and more of that as we go forward to make us continue to thrive.
I agree with you, and I've been approached in the past about running for public office, and I'm like, no, I like doing what I'm doing, and I like interacting with people, and I like giving back in the way that you reference. But I really admire people like yourself who run for public office, because it's not an easy thing to do, and I think it's getting even more difficult as time goes on, because not only of the amount of money that you have to raise to run for public office, but number two, just the explosion of social media and all the different outlets to follow someone. You can't, when you walk out your front door, that's it. That's the end of all your privacy. And you have to be very careful these days, because you never know, right?
Well, in my case, I've tried not to be any different, you're going to find me at my Publix, in my gym shorts and a T-shirt, and I'll answer any questions about homestead exemption that I can. But I come from a very humble background. My father was a house painter, had a small painting contracting business, and I was taught a long time ago by a football coach. He said, "It's a short trip from the penthouse to the outhouse, so don't get too full of yourself." So I think that's part of it. Try to continue to be accessible, reasonable, and not lose yourself in the process. Unfortunately, people run for office for different reasons, but if you really are doing it because it's about service, and that it's a gift that's given to you by the folks that empower you to lead, then you won't lose yourself. It's the folks that do it for the wrong reasons, because they want power, there's a lot of other things. And unfortunately, I think by and large, most public servants are like myself and really want to do the right thing. We may come at different angles of how that would take place, but I think most of us want to do the right thing or improve or do something for the community. Then there's always a few that I think people focus on that have undermined the trust and created the skepticism in public service and in the government and what have you. I want to get back to when people really kind of believed in each other and believed in our institutions.
I think we're blessed with many good public servants here in Hillsborough County and in the surrounding Tampa Bay area. So you and I were supposed to sit down several weeks ago.
Yes.
We planned this interview way back in March at the Strawberry Festival luncheon, and we were going to. We planned it for the date that we picked because trim notices were going out, because property values, property appraisals, anything to do with property, rents, etc., is extremely huge right now. Yeah. But let's first kick it off with talking about the trim notices, because we still have time, and people are, I got mine a couple weeks ago, and Yeah, it was much more popular a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. No, we mailed out the trim notices. They go out in August every year. And just so that people know, the TRIM stands for the Notice of Proposed Taxes. And so basically, and most people, they receive that. It's important that folks read that. It says it's not a bill at the top, so a lot of times people, they kind of toss it aside. But it literally is everything that will go into ultimately being your property taxes at the end of the day. Now, it's important to know that it really depicts the value of your home, and then any exemptions that you may qualify for or have, or the quality or the value of your property if it's commercial or what have you. It's not a tax bill, and I'm not in the tax business.
Right.
There's taxing authorities that actually set the tax rates that are the multiplier by which you ultimately come up with the number of what actually your taxes are. Then the tax collector, Nancy Milan, comes a calling sometime in November to actually collect the money. The one she hates it, but the one they write badly about in the Bible, right? But she'll come in November. So, but that's important, and I would hope that folks that have received that recently from me, that they'll take a look at that. If they have a concern, give us a call or shoot us an email, whatever it may be. We'll get with you and see if there's something wrong with your value. Tie goes to the taxpayer is the way I like to think of it, and so that's important. And it's also important to know from that date that it was mailed, that the TRIM notice will go out. And then There's a 25-day period that people can file for their Value Adjustment Board petitions if indeed they want to go that route, because they think that there's that they need to do that to have it addressed by the Value Adjustment Board, whether it be a value question on their assessment, or an exemption that perhaps that they were denied going forward. But by and large, most of these cases are taken care of. People call us, we work with them, and those kinds of things. But this is our go time.
It is.
Mid-August through September. So.
And I'm going to share with this audience, because we've talked about this before. I'm going to share with our audience out there. Never, as my mother said, ever throw away your trim notice, right?
No, and it is online.
It is online, but I remember one time I did not keep my trim notice, and I had to go, because I actually read the trim notice when it comes in. I love the way it's laid out. This was your taxes last year. This is your taxes. If nothing
is that
changes.
Because of me, or you've always done that?
Well, I think because of you, Bob.
Okay, good. I was hoping you'd say that.
But my mother always was like, I had to reference something back on my trim notice, and my mother said, I said, well, I don't have my trim notice. And my mother said, you threw away your trim notice? I mean, I thought, she said, well, you'll just have to go online now and get it, because they're, and thank God it was still, I could get it online. Right. I can go back years now with my trim notices attached to my property taxes.
That's very good.
I never get rid of it.
No, it is important. And I will point out the one thing that people sometimes, they'll see their notice of proposed taxes, their trim notice.
Yeah.
It'll end up with a number on there. There's based on what the tax rates end up being. But there'll be a number on there of what their taxes, their ad valorem taxes will be. Then they'll receive their actual tax bill in November, and then they'll call us or call the tax collector's office and say, well, wait a minute, my trim notice said this number, but it came back, the bill was more. They have to remember that what's on their trim notice or their notice of proposed taxes is ad valorem taxes or proposed taxes. There are non-ad valorem assessments or fees and what have you. Whether it be garbage fees, special, assessments for, maybe you live in a community that has a special taxing district. There's lots of other things, stormwater.
And that's all in flux right now.
Right, and those are added on top of the ad valorem. So sometimes people will forget that.
Well, I look at the three columns and the bottom line so that I have some idea, because in my particular case, my car insurance, my home insurance, and my taxes all come due in November. And I'm like, I'm broke by the time Christmas rolls around.
Well, and certainly people are being very stressed right now because all those things are going up.
They are. They're all going up.
Yeah.
So, usually by this time, I have some of those documents, and I still don't have them, which is making me extremely nervous.
Yes.
If you're just joining us now on Connecting with Kim, my guest in the chair today is Hillsborough County Property Appraiser Bob Henriquez. And we've been talking about trim notices, which you all have recently, everybody in Hillsborough County has received in their mail, property owners, which outlines what your proposed taxes minus some assessments for storm and water and this and that that'll come later, because those have to be decided by the county commission, that you're going to be paying in your property taxes. So, and as I said, please keep your trim notice. You're right, we've had the hottest property market, since COVID. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of heating up before COVID, but boom, after COVID, it went crazy. And for those of you, I'll remind you, that was 2020. And it kind of went crazy, and it's never really stopped. And we've just come through another storm. So maybe we ought to, spend a few minutes talking about that too, because I'm sure people, especially brand new people to Hillsborough County, they don't know, what to do.
Well, just to go back in history, really since 2013, we've had rising property values here. Typically, that's been anywhere on the low end from 6.5% to 8%. Maybe we're pushing 10% one of those years, and then all of a sudden, like you say, 19 and 20, things started to really go forward. In May of 2020, I believe we signed with Tom Brady, so I think that's what actually did it. But,
so we blame it on Tom.
It's actually blame it on Tom. Now he's gone. If things start to go south, then it's Baker Mayfield's fault. But no, in all seriousness, we saw between 20 and 21. So again, remember that your assessments are based on a given date, January 1st of a given year.
All right.
So between 20 and 21, so January 1st, 2021, in 20, the values had gone up 21%, which is a remarkable number, probably historic. This past year, between 22 and 23, so the trim notices that people have just received, Countywide, it was about 11.5%. So it's back closer to what we'd had more typically since property values started to rise, but certainly still
high.
Yeah, still high.
Still high.
And so we've seen that, but so last year but at the beginning of the year we're still crazy. Then of course interest rates started to rise and the market chilled a little bit. Now remember that because there's a 21% or 11.5%, if you're capped, if you have homesteaded property, you can't go up, your taxable value can't go up more than 3% in any given year,
right.
or inflation. Now, inflation's been over 3% for the last couple of years for the first time, really since probably 2000, 2001. So those folks didn't necessarily feel that increase quite as much in the terms of their tax bill, but they certainly still felt it, along with everything else that's going on.
Right.
Now, folks, the ones that really felt it between 20 and 21 and 22 and 23 were those folks that have just moved in or that had a real estate transaction, because they would feel really the full brunt of those increases between one year or the other. So it is important for folks to take a look at those things, make sure that they understand what's going on with their property values going up and what that means, and we're certainly available to help them in any way we can.
Well, and the other thing is we should probably spend a few minutes, I think, especially for new people. You know, homesteading is not something that occurs in every single state. I can tell you that for sure, because I used to have a home in Wisconsin on Lake Michigan, and there was no cap on the property taxes.
Right.
I mean, they just went up every year. At least here we have some protection. So for the sake of those folks who are new to our community and we want to make sure they're informed of everything that they're entitled to, we might want to spend a few minutes talking about that.
Well, homestead exemption is probably the king or queen of all exemptions here in Florida. And what that means is that once you acquire a piece of property and intend to make it your primary residence, as of January 1st of a given year, it's your primary residence. You can file in the previous year, and it'll take effect in that year, for your homestead exemption. And it allows you up to $50,000 off the assessed value of your property, which is important, but as properties have become, I mean, the median property value in Hillsborough County is over, right at $400,000.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question.
So that $50,000 off helps, but it's not as big a deal. But the bigger deal is the cap.
Is the cap.
And that came about a number of years ago when your property value and your taxable value were basically the same thing minus your exemptions. As property values rose, your taxes would go up commensurate with those increases. And so the idea of tax caps really was a national movement, and here it was called in Florida it was called the Save Our Homes Cap.
Right.
And it was part of a constitutional amendment, and it said that if you're capped, if you have homesteaded property that in subsequent years after you've homesteaded your property, your taxable value can't go up more than 3%, or inflation, whichever is less.
Right.
And so over the course of time, obviously your values could continue to rise over a great deal, but your taxable value will only go up, a smaller amount. And so that's important for people to know. It's not automatic. You have to apply for it.
You have to apply for it, people.
So if let's say you bought a property here, we're sitting here in September of 2023.
Right.
You bought a property sometime during 2023. File your application as soon as possible. You still have until the end of the 25 days past the trim notice to still file for your homestead exemption for 2024. I would hurry if that's the case, if you haven't already done so.
Right.
If not, you might miss out in a year.
Right.
But file for that homestead exemption. If it's your primary residence, you filed timely, and what have you, then you will set that your value in the subsequent year. That will be your cap. Will be set.
Right.
And then subsequent to that, every year your taxable value can't go up more than 3%. And over the course of time, that will be a big tax savings to folks. And also then the differential between that assessed value and your ultimate just or market value at the end of the day, when you abandon the homestead, sell your property, you could use that differential up to $500,000 if you're upsizing, or a percentage if you're downsizing. That's called portability. That allows you to lower the initial taxable value on your next homesteaded property. So these things are very important for folks to know. All the information's on our website. Certainly people can call about that. If they're new to Florida and don't know how all that stuff works, please get with us and we'll help you out, because my philosophy is we work very hard to find folks that are trying to, unfortunately, to commit fraud or do different things,
Right, which is becoming an increasing problem.
Right, which we could talk about that as well.
Yeah.
but I think it's just as important that we make sure that we provide information and folks take advantage of any tax break exemption that they're entitled to, so that they're, particularly if they're seniors and savers and folks like that that may or may not,
or widows or widowers.
Widows or widowers. That's important because finally the legislature last year finally raised that exemption. It used to be a $500 exemption, which ended up being nothing. But it goes back to the early 1900s when it was passed. They raised it to a $5,000 exemption now, so it means a lot more to folks that unfortunately have lost their loved one.
Well, and you and I think I became aware of it, on a conversation we had, because I became a widow in 2016, and I went and filed for it right away, even though at that point it was only $500. But I'm so grateful to the legislature for increasing that, because it really is a nice deduction now.
Wow.
So, and your website is so easy to navigate. I have to say, people, you need to go there. You need to go to the website. Let's give them the website address. How about we do that?
Right. We can go on to hcpfl.org and take a look, or just type in your search, whatever search engine, just type in my name, Bob Henriquez, Hillsborough County Property Appraiser, and it's going to pop up. And the good thing about the website, your trim notice is there, all the information of what goes into ultimately being what ends up being your trim notice is all there. There's links to various different agencies, the clerk's office, tax collector, different things like that.
It's really easy website to navigate.
In fact, it's interesting because sometimes people say that they'll come to our website to navigate to another agency. We tried to put as much information as we can, and there's a lot of horsepower within that website. And then we're actually in the process now of doing some improvements to it. We're going to leave all the functionality we have now and add some things, including probably some ways to access permits and other things that are important particularly to the folks that are in the real estate industry one way or another. So it is a very good tool both for yourself if you're looking at property or to invest in other properties. You can find information there, or if you just want to like stalk somebody, it's all there. You try to figure out where somebody is. We should probably say that. No, but honestly, a lot of folks use that to find insurance companies otherwise to find information or find folks, find their addresses and those kinds of things. We
only have a few minutes left, so if we want to cover anything about the storm, we should probably do it now.
That's important that we talk about that. In the interim time that we've been waiting to finally meet, we had a storm.
We had a storm.
Fortunately for us, unfortunately for some of our friends, particularly to the north of us in the Big Bend.
Yeah.
And I've had an opportunity to talk to the property appraisers in those affected counties to offer help, and it's heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking.
One in particular, Lee Burfield, up there, she has a lot of property. Some of the pictures she showed from her property, these oak trees that were, they long predate us. And just ripped from the ground. A lot of damage. People are going to be without their homes, without their property, no electricity. And it's really, you think, well, these are kind of unpopulated counties, 15,000 people and what have you, but those are 15,000 people that are affected greatly. And so it'll take some time to come back. But from our perspective, and this if you're watching somewhere in the Tampa area and you're in, say, Pinellas County, Mike Twitty's website would have the same thing. My good friend in Pinellas, or up in Citrus or Pasco, particularly if you're on the coast and we're affected, or flooding somewhere else. Here it's mostly lakes and rivers and what have you that are on the water. We have a place on our front page of our website, on the splash page, that you can go in and put on if you have had damage. You can send us pictures. We would love it if you can. This is a good lesson for folks during hurricane season. Take pre-pictures so that you can then compare them to the post pictures. That helps us. But if you had damage, a tree fell in your house, you had water damage, something else happened, you can go in there, let us know. We can send somebody else out to take a look now that we're sort of in the recovery phase. We obviously know where the flood-prone areas are. We've got our folks out there looking, but they can do that, or they can give us a call and report the damage, but right on the front page. That's important. And now the other thing important for folks to know, now the trim notices come out and they're thinking, okay, well then how do I get a break on my property taxes because I was damaged in the storm?
Right.
Remember that your taxes that you pay in November are based on January 1st previous to that. So,
right.
So we're basically historians from that standpoint. So there's really no way that we can address damage that happens in that year. Now, if it hasn't been repaired January 1st, 2024, certainly we can take that into account for next year's taxes.
Okay.
But generally what happens in this case is the legislature will step in. They'll either extend deadlines to pay your taxes, in some cases provide rebates, or give us the tools to go back and try to help folks when something's happened in that given year. But that's important because folks are, well, my house is damaged, it's inhabitable, and generally the legislature takes that into account when they give us those tools. Otherwise, we can't necessarily address it in this year's tax year. But either way, we want to have that information. We want to know where you are. We want to get out there, document that, and then that way we take it into account as we go forward.
Well, Bob, that's all we have time for today. I can't thank you enough for being our guest here on Connecting with Kim again. You've been such a great supporter, and you're always a great guest, and you are chock full of information. I mean, I just know that I'm always going to learn something when I sit down here and talk with you. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate it. It's always great to be here, and I feel the same way. I wish we had 2 hours. I could sit here and
I know.
Just,
There's never enough time.
All
There's
right.
never enough time.
Take care.
So that's all we have time for today here on Connecting with Kim on Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network. I'd like to thank my sponsor, the Spring of Tampa Bay, for providing my on-air wardrobe. Their mission is to provide safe spaces and empowering services to survivors of domestic violence and their children, and they do a fantastic job of it. And their thrift store on North Willow and the Spring Boutique on Swann and Henderson, all the net proceeds from those two locations support their mission. So join us next week for another exciting episode of Connecting with Kim, where our goal, again, is to help you live your best life in our corner of paradise. So long.